Humbert here, and today we're going to be talking about Unit 8, Learning Target 3. So we're going to be talking about simplifying radicals with division. So first of all, let's take a look at this first one. So sometimes when you simplify radicals, you end up getting the same radical over itself. Now remember, when you have any number divided by itself, it's going to cancel to 1. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking to do here. So then let's take a look at the steps of doing that. So the first step you're going to do is going to be to simplify the radical in the numerator. So that's the first thing you want to do, is to simplify the radical in the numerator. Then you're going to simplify the radical in the denominator, or on the bottom. So then once you have both of those radicals simplified, and that's just using the note sheet we did yesterday, you're going to put that same radical over itself and cross it out. So now you're going to make a fraction. And then with the pieces you pulled out, you're going to reduce what fraction is left over. Okay, so that's kind of the process that we're going to be using today. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that. So let's start by taking a look at number 1. So we want to simplify number 1 down. We want to first simplify all of the radicals, which is what I'm going to get going here. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the first one. So we're going to take the square root of 75 and the square root of 300. So the square root of 75 we can break down to 25 and 3, and 25 we can break down to 5 and 5. So left underneath the radical we have 3 times 5 times 5. So then we have a pair of 5s. So we're going to take that pair of 5s and bring it to the outside. And then we have 5 square root of 3. That's for that first one. Then we're going to take 300. And 300 I'm going to break down to 3 and 100. Remember, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Then 100 I'm going to break down to 10 and 10. The 10 I'm going to break down to 5 and 2, and 5 and 2. So then let's go ahead and write what we have left underneath our radical. Well, we're going to have 2 2's, 1 3, and 2 5's. So we're going to take out a pair of 2's and a pair of 5's. So when I take those out, I'm going to multiply those on the outside and leave what's left underneath the radical. So then I have 10 square root of 3. So now I'm going to take both of these and put them back into the fraction. Now when I do that, I do 5 square root of 3 divided by 10 square root of 3, because that 10 square root of 3 represents the 300, and that was originally what was on the bottom. So now I can go ahead and I can cross those off, and I'm left with the fraction 5 divided by 10. And I can reduce that fraction 5 over 10. Both of those are divisible by 5. So the fraction itself is going to reduce to 1/2. Okay, so that's your final answer for number 1, is just 1/2. Now let's take a look at this next one. So really all we're doing is simplifying radicals and putting them over the top of each other. Trickiest part, simplifying the fraction. So we're going to have 32 and we're going to have 50. Well, 32 I can break down to 4 and 8. 4 breaks down to 2 and 2, and then 8 breaks down to 4 and 2, and that 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So for 32, what you end up having is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Then when you figure out your pairs, you're going to have 2 pairs of 2. So I'm going to have 2 times 2 on the outside and a square root of 2 left over. So that's 4 square root of 2. Now let's take a look at 50 and splitting that down. So this is going to become 25 and 2. And then 25 breaks down to 5 and 5. So left underneath the radical we have 2 times 5 times 5. So there's one pair of 5's that we can take out. And we're going to take that out of the radical, and it's going to be 5 square root of 2. So let's reassemble our fraction. So we're going to do 4 square root of 2 divided by 5 square root of 2. So then you can take the square roots of 2 and cancel them out, and then you're left with 4 over 5. So 4/5 is the final answer for number 2. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at 3 and 4. So this is going to be the same thing. So if you feel like you're starting to get it, go ahead and feel free to do it on your own. Your note sheet must be completed, and I do not want you copying it. I will turn you away if I feel like you haven't spent enough time on it. So let's take a look at this next one. So we have the square root of 80 that we're simplifying, and the square root of 45. Well, I see that 80 ends in a 0, so that means I can divide it by 10. So I get 8 and 10, which is 4 and 2, and 4 you can break down to 2 and 2. And then 10 you can break down to 5 and 2. So let's go ahead and let's write everything that's underneath our radical. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So then underneath that radical I end up having 2 pairs of 2's. So we can go ahead and multiply that out. So 2 times 2 is 4, and then we have the square root of 5. So that's for our first radical. For our second radical, we're going to split up 45, which is 9 and 5, and then we're going to split up 3 and 3. So underneath the radical, we have 3 times 3 times 5. So we can take those pairs of 3's and pull them out to the outside. And then we have 3 square root of 5. So then we're going to re-put that into a fraction over itself. So I have 4 square root of 5 divided by 3 square root of 5. So I can cancel out my square roots of 5. However, I still have this fraction left over. And the fraction 4/3 cannot be reduced anymore. So your final answer then is just 4/3. Next, let's take a look at 45. So, 45 and 320. So we're going to break down 45 and we're going to break down 320. So what divides 45? So 45 we're going to do 9 and 5, and then we're going to split 3 and 3. So underneath the radical we have 3 times 3 times 5. Then we have a pair of 3's we can take out, so our final answer for 45 is 3 square root of 5. Now for 320, I see that it has a 0 at the end. So I'm going to do 32 and 10. Well, 10 I can break down to 5 and 2. 32 I can break down to 4 and 8. 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. 8 I can break down to 4 and 2. 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. So let's go ahead and let's put that underneath the radical. So then we're going to have 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and a 5. So I end up getting 3 different pairs of 2's. So those are my 3 different pairs of 2's. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply them outside of the radical, and what's left underneath is the square root of 5. So then I end up getting 8 square root of 5. So now we want to go ahead and write that as our fraction. So I have 3 square root of 5 divided by 8 square root of 5. So the square root of 5 or the square root of 5 is going to cancel out, and then we're just left with the fraction 3 over 8. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at the back side here. So we got a lot more we can practice with. All right, so let's take a look at these next ones. So for these next ones, we want to go ahead and we want to divide out 72 and 12. So we have, 75. So we have 75 and we have 12. Well, 75 we can break down to 3 and 25. 25 breaks down to 5 and 5. So then we have 3 times 5 times 5. So because I have a pair of 5's, I can take that out and put it on the outside. So I'm left with 5 square root of 3 for my 75, which is not my final answer, Miss Humbert. All right, then we want to break down the 12. So for the 12, we have 4 and 3, and then we have 2 and 2. So then we have underneath the radical 2 times 2 times 3. So we're going to take out a pair of 2's, write that on the outside, and then we have the square root of 3. So I have 5 square root of 3 divided by 2 square root of 3. So I'm going to cancel that out, and then I'm going to write the fraction 5 halves. And I do want you guys to actually write that out separately. I don't want you to just cross it off and then box your answer from there. So please make it nice and neat for me. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at dividing 32. So when we divide 32, and then we're going to do 50. Well, let's start thinking logically, okay? We've done 32 and 50 a dozen of times now. So I flipped it back and I looked at number 2. And when I did 32, I ended up getting 4 square root of 2. So now I'm getting smart and I'm referencing stuff I already did. And I already did 50 on number 6. And when I did 50, I got 5 square root of 2. So now we can write that as a fraction as 4 square root of 2 divided by 5 square root of 2. So we can cross off our square roots of 2 and we're left with 4 divided by 5. So if we've already done the radical, there's no sense in us continuing to repeat it over and over again. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at these next ones here. So let's take a look, 36 and 100. So we have not done those yet, so we have to do those. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of 36. Well, the square root of 36, I'm going to split that up into 6 and 6, and 2 and 3, and 2 and 3. So then underneath the radical, I'm going to have 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. So I end up having everything as a pair. And when everything has a pair, that means that my radical is going to go away altogether. So when I take the pair of 2's out, I get a 2. When I take the pair of 3's out, I get a 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. So that completely simplified to just being 6. Next, let's take a look at the square root of 100. So we're going to break 100 down, and we're going to break it down to 10 and 10 and 5 and 2 and 5 and 2. Remember, there are multiple different ways you can do this. Then, left underneath the radical, I have 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. So I have a pair of 2's and a pair of 5's that I can take out. So 2 times 5 is 10. Because when I took them out of the radical, they weren't pairs anymore. And the radical went away because it all was in pairs. So then I end up having the fraction 6 over 10. But that's not a completely reduced fraction, so we have to reduce that. Both 6 and 10 are divisible by 2, so then I get 3 over 5. So my reduced fraction for that one is 3/5. Let's take a look at number 8. Now for number 8, we haven't done 9 or 64 yet. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do the square root of 9 and the square root of 64. So for 9, I can split that into 3 and 3. So I know I'm going to have pairs when I write it underneath the radical. So when I take it out of the radical, I'm just going to write it as 3. 64 I can break down to 8 and 8, and then I can break it down to 4 and 2 and 4 and 2. And the 4's are going to break down to 2 and 2. So then, underneath my radical, I'm going to have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So I end up getting 3 pairs of 2's, which means I can take them all out and multiply them. Well, 2 times 2 times 2 is going to give me just 8. And remember, the radical went away because everything's simplified. So then the top of my fraction ended up being 3, and the bottom ended up being 8. And we can't reduce the fraction 3 over 8 anymore, so that is our final answer. Now let's take a look at these last couple here. So for these last couple, I have 45. Well, we already did 45 a couple of times. So we actually did 45 on number 3. And when we did 45, the square root of 45 we found to be 3 square root of 5. Now, we haven't done the square root of 20 as of yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So 20 we can split into 4 and 5, and then we can split it into 2 and 2. So we have 2 times 2 times 5, so I can take a pair of 2's out. And then I'm left with 2 square root of 5. So then when I write out my fraction, I have 3 square root of 5 divided by 2 square root of 5. So I can go ahead and I can cancel out those square roots of 5's, and I'm left with 3 over 2. So that's 3/2, okay? Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 10. So for number 10, we already did the square root of 36, and we found that to be 6 when we simplified. We need to figure out 25. So 25 I can split up into 5 and 5. So then underneath my radical, I have 5 times 5. So again, I have an entire pair underneath my radical. So when I take that out, I'm left with just 5 because everything ended up being in a pair. So that's going to be 6 divided by 5. Well, that fraction can't be reduced anymore, so that is our final answer. So let's take a look now at number 11. So for number 11, we've actually already done the square root of 80. And we did the square root of 80 in problem number 3. And when we did it in problem number 3, we ended up getting 4 square root of 5. Now, we haven't done 180 as of yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So we want to break down 180. How do we break down 180? Well, it's going to be 18 and 10 because it ends in a 0. Then I can split this into 9 and 2. I can split this into 5 and 2. And then I can take and I can split that 9 down to 3's. So then I end up getting 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. So then I have a pair of 2's, I have a pair of 3's. So I can take each of those out. 2 times 3 Square root of 5 is going to be 6 square root of 5. So now I can go ahead and I can write that as a fraction. So I get 4 square root of 5 divided by 6 square root of 5. So my square roots cancel out, and I'm left with 4 over 6. Well, the fraction 4 over 6 can be reduced. They're both divisible by 2, and that's going to give you the fraction 2/3. Let's take a look at number 12. So for number 12, we want to break down these radicals. We haven't simplified 72 or 128, so we're going to have to do that to start off with. So what divides 72? Well, I see that it's even, so I did 2 and 36. Well, 36 I can break down to 6 and 6, and 6 I can break down to 2 and 3. So then let's go ahead and let's write out what's underneath our radicals. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 2's and 2 3's. So we have a pair of 2's we can take out and a pair of 3's. So I have 2 times 3, and then I'm left over with the square root of 2, so this becomes 6 square root of 2. Then I want to take a look at breaking down 128. So what I did is I just took 128 and divided it by 4 because I was curious, was that going to work? And it turns out it does. So I have 4 and 32. Well, 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. 32 I'm going to break down to 4 and 8. And then I'm going to break that 4 down to 2 and 2, and that 8 down to 4 and 2, and that 4 down to 2 and 2. So let's go ahead and let's write out all of the 2's that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2's. 7 2's. So I wrote out all of those 2's. So now I have a pair here, a pair here, and a pair here. So there's 3 2's that are going to come to the outside. 1, 2, 3. Left over is the square root of 2. So then we have 8 square root of 2. So we have 6 square root of 2 divided by 8 square root of 2. So the square roots of 2 are going to cancel out, and you're left with the fraction 6 divided by 8. Well, both of those are divisible by 2, and you end up getting 3 over 4. So your final answer is 3/4. So that concludes your very long note video today. I apologize, but hopefully it makes sense. And show me your note sheet when you're done. Thanks for listening.